Welcome to the Clear the Air podcast with D and Q.
I'm D.
And I'm Q. Let's air it out, man. So, today.
It's nice to see you again too, my brother.
God.
Always good to break bread.
When am I going to learn?
Go ahead and dive in now, brother.
Double standards. They exist between men and women. Why? Why do they exist? I'm sorry, do they exist? Are there double standards? Why do they exist? Let's talk about it. So, are there double standards between men and women?
Of course.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Why do you think they exist?
It's a good question, bro. I really don't know. Maybe, I don't know. Did somebody just decide one day that, hey, this is how it's going to be, and just society just kind of followed the protocol for it? I think that's kind of the situation with everything, right? Somebody decided something or said something, and it just became gospel, right?
I would like to believe so. In my honest opinion, I've got two things to say, just so I don't forget. This was my second thing, but what I would say is yes. I think cultures throughout history have said this is the way that this should be. Mm-hmm. Whether it's come from religion,
yep.
Whether it's come from, again, just culture.
Mm-hmm. Older generations.
Yep. And so what we do, or what we have done, is said, okay, cool. I like this. This is a good standard. Let's follow this. Law has impacted some of that. So it's come from a few different places. My first reason, I would say, is, and I know during Women's History Month, I think we started off one podcast off by saying that women have gotten the shorter end of the stick in a lot of ways. I would carry on in that vein. And what I mean when I say that is, women have always been secondary in culture, okay? You even have in the Bible where, and I do believe it's taken out of context like a lot of the Bible is. Sorry to go spiritual, but I'm going to go there and I'm going to hop off. You even have where it said that women should not talk in the church. Women should not be vocal in the church.
Definitely not preach. You hear that.
Exactly. So again, you have some things I believe are taken out of context. Y'all want to have that conversation offline, cool, holla at me. But I think that's some of the reasons why. And so, how a woman, I guess the place where the man is the head of the home, and therefore you say, well, if you're the head, then that means you're the only one who matters and you are the only one who gets to say so. And so you just take kind of how women have been treated again. Like, for example, in the days like ancient Egypt, compare how many times a woman was the queen versus how many times the man was the king. It was just, for the most part, not something that happened. And if a woman did become, and I'm not going to go into the specifics, it was more or less like she did it with the intention to gain power for her son. Sometimes. So anyway, enough on that. Let's talk about some of the double standards. Okay? Which one you can think of?
Well, to me, the biggest one, now I won't say the biggest one, probably the most common one is the fact that, a guy can be promiscuous. I'll say that.
Mm-hmm.
And he's, it's kind of looked at as being okay.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if a woman is promiscuous, they are often labeled as being loose, being...
He's staying away from the word.
Yeah.
Shout out to you, because I think if we use it could be misconstrued that that's
right.
what we call it.
Right.
So,
right. But let's just say they can be you know, they can be seen as having a high body count. Let's just put it that way. Whereas if a guy has a high body count, it's not really that big of a deal. They just being a guy. You know what I mean? So I think that's the biggest one.
Real quick, just to kind of, because the body count is the part that's, you know, that's frowned upon. Woman with a high body count, she's loose, or that other word that y'all could come up with. If a man is that way, well, it's just what a man is supposed to do. A man is supposed to go hunt and conquer, and it's okay. Okay, think about it even in this way. I have 2 daughters, 3 sons. Actually, I got more kids than that, but I'm going to protect my daughters because I don't want them to even go there. I don't even want to think about it. With my sons, I know it's going to happen. But let me give you a caveat with that, because all 3 of my boys have women in their lives. It's not that I take their girlfriend's side, but I already know, I know them, and then I also know what boys and men are prone to do. So I kind of have a relationship with the young women just as my way, because I look at them as my daughters as well. So that's another story. But yeah, I think sex is probably one of the bigger ones. You got another one you could think of?
Men aren't supposed to be emotional. We're not supposed to cry.
Show our emotions.
Yeah, we're supposed to just always be tough. We're always supposed to be, you know, the man. You know what I mean? Showing emotion has oftentimes been called, you know, showing a sign of weakness. I do like that here lately, you know, men showing emotion is kind of being promoted and accepted, and actually being, you know, like, you know, guys, let's talk this out, because, you know, it prevents problems like depression and anxiety and mental health. A lot of that stuff is coming to the forefront now. So it seems like that double standard is actually taking a turn for the better. But for the longest time, you know, guys showing emotion was a sign of weakness.
Well, just to go into that, you have to imagine, because again, these are these standards that have come from generations before us. You know that as a man, family-wise, you're supposed to be the strong one, the provider,
Protector.
the protector, the one that holds down everything for your family. But what happens when, in and of itself, those different hats can be very stressful. Holding a job that's, you know, you're able to provide and do what you need to do. Meeting the expectations of your spouse, significant one, you know, it is a lot. And so where do you vent to? And I think that's a whole nother podcast of how to deal with stress. You know, the episode that we dropped a little while ago about John Morant, part of the reason that he was going to, you know, after the suspension and he went to a facility, he specifically said it because he was learning how to deal with stress. And so some of the ways we act out, okay, aren't the best, but it's because we were never taught that it's okay to be vulnerable with how we feel. Typically, I teach my boys, and I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back. I'm just saying it's not typical. You know, you fall as a young boy and you're told, get up. Your daughter falls and you help her get up. Oh, baby, are you okay? And, you know, you wipe her tears and all that. Your son does it and it's not the same. And I'm not saying that I'm not giving my opinion left or right. I'm more or less just saying that's what we typically do. And so when you think about it in those terms, when you're just taught to be tough, what we have to do is we have to think about how that impacts us in our relationships, which is a whole nother podcast as well. Ladies, I want to say this to you. You want a balanced man. You want a man who's able to be the macho, masculine man. But you also want your man to be able to be vulnerable and talk to you, know how to talk to you. Because if everything he does is masculine and tough and rough, because that's the way he's taught and not taught any other way, he may deal with you in that way. And oftentimes, women have a way of, if he's not a certain kind of way, you're less than a man. So we have to be careful. I'm not getting at women, I'm just saying we have to be careful of what we say and what we give off and even how we communicate, because we could actually communicate something wrong based off of this double standard and therefore not get what you need in a relationship. So
another one is, and before, I just want to expound on that because we've been talking a lot about communicating effectively, and that's going to be a future episode. And so, but that's why that's important, because you know, you want your man to feel comfortable with expressing himself, so you can have that effective communication. And another one is the disparity in pay between women and men. That glass ceiling. You know, women. It's been noted that they're you know, underpaid than their male counterparts, whether it's in corporate America, whether it's in sports. We definitely see it in sports.
right.
A lot of the female athletes and the professional leagues in the offseason, they'll have to go, you know, out the country and play, you know, to earn that extra income.
Right.
So, and then, you know, in corporate America as well, it seems that though women are paid less
For the same job.
for doing the same job.
Yeah. And I just want to say this real quick, because people will clap back in the comments and say certain things. You cannot deny in sports, for example, WNBA versus NBA, you cannot deny that WNBA players are paid less. Someone may say, well, yes, because nobody wants to go to the games.
Right, they don't generate as much money.
We're not talking about the why, we're just saying that it is the
what it
case.
is, yes.
Right.
Right, that's all. We're just stating the double standards. We're
Right.
not saying, you know, we definitely ain't condoning them. Yeah, we're just saying what they are.
Right, and you know, furthermore, if it didn't happen other places in the world, maybe we don't talk about it, but it happens in corporate America as well. So again, it's just jobs. So it's a tough thing, and I think it has gotten better, I would say. Okay.
There's been a lot more recognition, a lot more changes, even with how women's athletes travel. You know, there have been a lot of upgrades. I know women's U.S. soccer team, they had a big change in revenue and what their athletes were paid and things like, and the conditions that they had. I think it was during the Olympics. They didn't have the same conditions as the men, and so so that changed for the better. Another double standard is abuse. A lot of people feel as though men can't be abused, can't be taken advantage of sexually, or just any kind of abuse. Any type of abuse from a woman. So that's a double standard. And a lot of men who are victims of that, they may not want to come forward because they don't want to, again, that sign of weakness.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Makes you look like you're less than a man because you let a woman, you know, come at you some kind of way. Just going back to for a second when we talk about the jobs, we do want to shout out the women, because on one of the previous episodes that we did, you know, where we talked about could you be with a woman who makes more money than you? So we know that it's not that it happens in every case. We're just saying that it does happen. So shout out to women who are doing that, whether they're grinding with multiple jobs on a hustle, or they've just found a way to make in corporate America their presence known by the talent that they showcase.
Get your bag, boo.
Get your
bag. Boo.
Yeah.
Get
So
your bag.
just going back to the abuse portion, let's go here. This is gonna be unpopular, but there are some of us who the first woman in our life we were abused by, which is our mom. And I'm not necessarily talking about getting your behind whooped, because I got my behind whooped.
You know that, bro.
But we're talking about maybe even some of the verbal things that get said. You know, sexually, I think the movie Antoine Fisher, if you can remember that movie with Denzel, that movie captured some of that. And even where he confronted, after he was in the military, he confronted his abuser, the home in which he was in. So again, and let's just be clear, we're not diminishing, obviously, that it happens with women. What we're saying is, if a woman says it, I'm not saying that it's always gone well for women who have come out. Again, we're just saying it'll be believed 100 times faster if a woman says it than it will if a man says it. Again, being very clear, we're not trying to diminish anything that happens in terms of a woman coming out and saying that she's been abused. We're not talking about whether it's right or it's wrong or whether she's believed every time. We're just saying it is a double standard that if I was to come and say my wife has abused me, my wife does not. But if I was to say that, it'd be a different story. So let's clear the air. I think we all, for the most part, can agree that there is at least a double standard. We've talked about it in terms of sex. We've talked about it in terms of emotions. The difference between men and women when it comes to sex is a man can have a high body count. Woman has a high body count, and it's a problem. We label them. Emotions. It's okay for women to show emotions, and we even label women as being the aggressors when it comes to emotion. I did not say this, but I actually think men are more emotional than women.
Really?
I do. That's a whole other podcast.
Hmm.
I think we also talked about it in terms of jobs. We mentioned the glass ceiling and pay. Do women get paid what men do when they have the exact same job? We've known that it's been a disparity. That's not anything to dispute. And then lastly, we can talk about it in terms of abuse. A man comes and says that he was abused by a woman, you will probably be laughed at. Again,
Or not believed.
Or not believed, and it goes back to that idea that you're macho, you're a man, so that can't happen to you. I think Terry Crews talked about that too. All right? And then the movie Antoine Fisher. So as we clear the air.
And hold up, real quick. It's a scene in Thin Line Between Love and Hate, classic, one of my favorites. Remember, she was stalking him or whatever. And he said, I went to the police station. He ain't giving a brother no respect. I'm like, oh, she's stalking you. And that's when she broke down his joint in front of the police station. Yeah.
Lord have mercy.
Broke it down to my brake pads. But anyway. Yeah, crazy.
Well, as we clear the air, I guess a question we can ask is there a way that we can fix this? And I think society is going to be society. You don't fix society. Society is what it is. And it comes from, like we mentioned before, just the generations and the history of how we viewed things. I don't think we need to worry about fixing the world as much as we should worry about, as men, fixing our families. Manage what you can manage, okay? So, for example, I don't want my daughters walking around with their bras on in the house. Therefore, I probably should tell my sons to at least put on a shirt. Even if it's what we call the A shirt, because we don't want to call it that other thing. All right, so something, But again, you create the standard for your family.
I think it, I'm not going to disagree with you a little bit, but I'm going to say this. I think it starts with us. You know what I mean? You're right. We have to be the change that we want to see.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So, because if that was the case, then the strides that we have seen being made wouldn't have been made if somebody was like, hey, this is not right.
Right.
We have to change the narrative. And it's gonna be a process, you know what I mean? If I do it with my family, you do it with your family, all our friends do it with their family, soon it'll just spread, you know what I mean? But it has to start somewhere. It has to start somewhere. And just first of all, like as with anything, you have to acknowledge that there is a problem, right?
Yeah.
So you have to acknowledge, and we already did, that there are double standards, and it's not right, it's not fair,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? But the world is not a fair place. But that don't mean we have to continue that. We don't have to condone it. We don't have to accept it.
Exactly.
We can be the change. We can start the change.
Are there any double standards that we missed out on that you can think of? Maybe there's some racial ones. We didn't really go there.
Yeah.
But are there?
But we
others?
should have, and we will.
We will. I think when you start doing that, that's a whole nother podcast. So I
Yeah.
think we stayed away for a reason.
We always talk about micro and macro. We just did a macro thing right now.
Right.
So
Right.
we'll dive into it,
Yeah.
more specific ones,
Mhm.
because we can actually do an episode on each one we talked about.
Exactly.
And like you said, we didn't include several ones.
Mhm. But we want to hear from you. What are some double standards that we did not mention? What are some that impact you in particular? We would like to ask that you make sure that you're following us, subscribing to us. For the video aspect of the podcast, do that. Subscribe to YouTube. For the audio part of our podcast, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We are there. We're also on all social media platforms: TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Subscribe and follow so you don't miss a thing. Peace.
Peace.